met Aiden in a grocery store aisle I almost never walked down. I was hunting for fresh basil. He was blocking the pasta. He turned his cart, apologized, and then, without missing a beat, asked if I knew the difference between bucatini and spaghetti. He said it with a grin that made the fluorescent lights warmer. Bucatini has a hole. It holds the sauce, I told him, reaching for a bunch of basil I didn't even need anymore, because suddenly dinner tasted like possibility. He found me again at checkout. I'm making puttanesca. It needs someone to complain about the anchovies. Are you free? He was ridiculous, bold, wheeling his cart like a prop. I surprised myself by saying yes, and surprised myself again when the night turned out to be as easy as warm bread, and the way his laugh seemed to curl around mine. Later, I would try to find the exact moment the coin flipped from gold to lead. If there was a hinge, if there was a sound when it turned. At first, there was only light. He was an abundance of small kindnesses. He offered to pick me up from my night classes when it was raining. He sat through an indie film where the chairs squeaked louder than the script. He brought me a small cactus when I told him every plant I owned had the shelf life of an open can of paint. He named the cactus Audrey the Two. He said he had a morbid sense of humor, but the plant would live because I would will it. We fell into a rhythm. Late-night phone calls. A messy Sunday brunch. Handwritten notes in my bag. You're my favorite line break, one said, and I kept it tucked inside my wallet like an emergency booster for bad days. He made music on his laptop after work, minimalist synth with glittering piano arpeggios, and let me listen before he uploaded. I edited grant proposals for a nonprofit that paid poorly and thanked sincerely. He teased me for being the kind of person who donated to her own workplace. He said I was too tender, like fruit that bruises if you look at it. There were early shadows. That was the first thing my therapist would call them later. Early shadows. Why do you let your landlord talk to you like that? He asked after Urmila, my landlord, raised my rent by a sliver, and I agreed without protest. Sometimes you have to negotiate. I laughed it off. I'm allergic to conflict, I said, twirling spaghetti around my fork. Anyway, it's just $50. He smiled a little oddly. Still, you're allowed to want things. He turned that sentence into a chorus once and played it for me. You're allowed to want things, layered so the words tumbled after one another. A soft herd, another kind of permission. The first time he sang it, I cried. The third time, he laughed at me crying and kissed the tears like he'd made them appear on purpose. He started coming over every night. It was easy to say yes. He had warm hands. He remembered things like the brand of tea I complained about running out of. He opened jars for me and fixed my crooked shelf and scribbled chord progressions on napkins. We got used to the other's morning face. He learned that I didn't like to be touched while I was waking up unless his hand was still and warm at the side of my hip and anchoring. I learned that he liked to empty my dishwasher at odd hours and that he liked to be thanked for it. I thanked him. It didn't cost me anything. Trouble arrives like a quarter slipped under a napkin. You don't notice it until you pick up the drink and hear the clang. The first clang. My best friend Ria's birthday dinner. A long wooden table. Margaritas. The music loud enough to nudge conversation forward. Ria stood to toast and clasped my hand, eyes glossy, and when she sat down again, she leaned into us like a conspirator. "I'm so happy you're happy," she said to me, then to him. "And you? Thank you for loving my girl right." Aiden squeezed my thigh under the table, which I thought was a sweet response until his hand tightened, just enough for my smile to wobble. "Right," he said. "She's easy to love." On the ride home, he went quiet. I asked if something was wrong. He said he was tired. I pushed my hair behind my ear and looked out the window at the lake rolling past like a slow audience. The next day, he reheated leftovers without asking and told me my friends were a little performative. "How do you mean?" I asked. "I don't know," he said, shrugging. "It's like they don't want you to grow. They want you to stay small." "I don't think that's true," I said, careful to keep my voice gentle. He smiled and kissed my forehead and said, "Maybe he was just projecting." He said it like a professor sliding a piece of vocabulary across the table as a treat. I thought, how self-aware. He started asking who I was seeing after work. He started offering rides and then reacting strangely if I said no. "I just don't want you walking alone," he'd say. "It's not about controlling you." He said that often, about small things. "It's not about controlling you." He said it preemptively, as if he knew the accusation was waiting in the wings and wanted to kill it before it found its mark. He complained that my apartment was chaos. He wasn't wrong. My sock drawer was a drunk mosaic. My pantry had doubles of everything because I forgot what I'd bought. One Saturday morning, I found him reorganizing my spices alphabetically. He had pulled all the jars out. They were lined up like obedient students. I laughed. "Wow, okay, librarian. I prefer order," he said, not looking up. "It lowers your anxiety." "My anxiety?" I asked, amused. "Everyone's anxiety," he corrected. He tucked paprika between oregano and rosemary, and I could not think of a way to object to someone improving my kitchen. He slept over on weeknights and brought his big headphones and toothbrush and 3 changes of clothes. His presence expanded cell by cell. He joked that he should start leaving rent in the cactus pot. He started making piles, his notebooks on my coffee table, his scarf on the chair, an extra pair of shoes by the door. When I mentioned, carefully, that it was feeling a little tight in here, he laughed and picked me up and set me on the kitchen counter like I was light enough to be cutlery. "You're cute when you're territorial," he said. "I'll get a storage bin for under your bed." It felt like accommodation. It was conquest disguised as consideration. It took months to learn the difference. You start to second-guess your memory at a tempo you don't notice until you are out of breath. There was a night in late February when the radiator coughed and hissed, and we were both raw and tired. The plan had been to watch a movie. The plan turned into Aiden argued with his producer on the phone. The second chorus needed a longer swell. The drop was trite. The algorithm liked a certain length and he was a slave to it. When he finally hung up, he was knotted tight. I brought him tea. He didn't take it. The tea sagged in my hand. The lemon slice looked theatrical and stupid. He asked me why I always turned the lights so dim when he needed to read. He said, "Do you want me to fail?" It wasn't a question you answer out loud. He blew out a noisy breath, and then soft grinned like a curtain lowering. "I didn't mean that," he said in the same voice you used to talk a dog down from a bark. He pinched my chin, turned my face. You know I didn't mean that. He apologized before I had the chance to be hurt. He was good at that. I learned new definitions of time. 5 minutes could stretch across a whole evening if he needed me to explain why I hadn't responded to his text from 34 minutes earlier with the kind of enthusiasm that matched the heat of his enthusiasm, which also had to match the heat of his day, which was usually on fire. If I was tired in a way he didn't expect, he was preemptively disappointed. You don't prioritize us, he'd say, eyes narrowing in real sorrow. This is when relationships die, when you get lazy. He delivered these sentences like he was a man who had watched many tragedies and was trying to stop another. The weight of his concern made me small with compliance. I started answering his texts with more exclamation points than necessary. I started sending him pictures of my dinner. I started turning my read receipts off and then on again when he said turning them off made him feel shut out. Let me in, he'd say, not mean, just plaintive. He said he was asking me to be transparent. Transparency was healthy. Did I not want healthy? Did I not want us to win? I did. We were good at the beginning. The beginning had happened. I wasn't making it up. He began telling me stories about his ex, Sarah, that always ended with him as the almost hero. Sarah had cheated. Sarah had withheld. Sarah had called his music a hobby, like she was spitting pit seeds at his head. I stayed longer than I should have because I thought I could rescue her, he said. I'm old school. I don't know how to quit. He said this the way some men will say they don't know how to fold a fitted sheet, like it's proof of character. It felt dangerous to do anything that smelled like Sarah. So when he asked for my phone passcode in case of emergency, I told him. When he asked why my coworker Thomas sent a meme with a heart, I told him it was the only heart available on his keyboard, and I would tell Thomas to stop if that made Aiden uncomfortable. When he asked me not to go to Ria's art show because her boyfriend had once posted a joke about musicians that Aiden found personally insulting, I said I'd just go to the next one. You choose me, he said gratefully, and I glowed with the warmth of being chosen for doing the choosing he'd asked me to do. He was always grateful. Gratitude is a thread you can hang a guillotine from. It looks charming until the blade falls. My mother called one Sunday when he was in the shower and his music was hissing softly from the bedroom speaker. He sounds busy, she said, and I realized the sound was bleeding through the walls. He's just finishing a track, I said. He's almost done. You sound tired, she said. Are you eating? I was always eating, it seemed. Aiden loved to feed me what he cooked and watch me react. I told my mother about the rosemary potatoes he'd made me at midnight. My mother hummed noncommittally. He sounds intense, she said. I hope he's kind. He is, I said too quickly. He's very committed to everything. Commitment is not kindness, she said gently. But I had to go because the shower stopped, and I wanted to be off the phone before he heard me sounding defensive about him. Later he asked if it was my mother. What did you tell her? He said, drying his hair. The towel left little lint flurries. Did you tell her you're happy? Yes, I said, and he smiled and told me about a drummer he wanted to collaborate with, and the smile was wide enough that I felt like a fool for the slice of fear I'd let. creep under my door and sit in my shoes. The first time he threw something, it was a mug he insisted had sentimental value. It was a white mug with a chipped rim that I'd found at a thrift store years ago, hand-painted with small blue stars. "This is the mug I used the day I got my first paid gig," he said once, holding it like a newborn bird. I didn't know then that sentimental value meant mine to care for, not his. The day he threw it, it shattered into star-sprayed shards across the kitchen floor. He was angry because Spotify had started a new payout method that was worse for mid-tier artists like him, and his producer had sent a link with a shrug emoji. I said, "That's awful." And then I didn't say anything else because sometimes language wore me like a damp shirt, and he looked at me like my quiet was betrayal. "Do you care?" he demanded. "Do you care at all about what matters to me?" "I just don't know what to say," I said. And you could have poured oil on the fire for how fast he went up. "Try," he barked. "Try harder." When the mug broke, he froze, his breath sawed into pieces. He looked at my face, rearranged his own like a stagehand had tugged a rope, and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry. That was an accident. I'm just under pressure." He knelt and tried to gather the shards with his bare hands until I grabbed a broom. He let me. He let me clean up his glass, and later, he rested his head on my lap and said, "You're safe for me." And I stroked his hair, wondering when I had become a harbor that needed to weather storms that weren't mine. I told myself the mug was an anomaly. People break things sometimes. The mug is not the man. I told myself this until the sentence wore out like gum that no longer tasted like anything. I swept another thing under the couch. The way he started checking my tone like it was a bank account we jointly owned. "You're cold," he'd say. "You're withholding." He liked that word, withholding, like it proved he knew psychoanalytic vocabulary even if he used it like a hammer. "I'm not withholding," I'd say, because that's what withholding people would say, obviously. And therefore now I was both withholding and lying. If I was too affectionate, he said it felt cloying. If I was so neutral I could have been a pond, he said he felt abandoned. There was no right temperature. There was no temperature at all, only a swing. He stopped calling it we. He started calling it us, like it was a team I was failing to train for. "You blew off us," he'd say if I asked for a night to read a book in silence. "You sabotaged us," if I told him I was going to Wisconsin for a weekend to see my sister's new baby. He didn't try to forbid me. That would have been obvious. Instead, he asked questions I couldn't answer in any way that allowed me to keep my dignity. "So you're choosing them?" He knew I would say yes. Everyone deserves to be chosen. He knew I would feel selfish for choosing anyone who wasn't him. I did not see the maze until I was deep inside it. In the first rooms it looked like love. The last night started with lilies. I had bought them in a reckless fit at the bodegas on 7th, white with pale green throats. Because I remembered my mother once saying a house with flowers feels like someone has looked at it and decided it deserves softness. I put them in a vase on the kitchen table. Aiden walked in and immediately moved the vase to the sideboard without a comment. Small, harmless. I slid it back. He slid it again. "They'll block the view," he said. "Of what?" I asked, half laughing. "The radiator?" He rolled his shoulders. "The space. he said, like this was self-evident. You don't know how to stage things. I live here, I said. He leaned back against the counter and smiled as if he was about to quote a guru. That doesn't mean you know what looks good. My things, I said. My table. Why are you being like this? He asked, baffled. As if I had arrived home with a bad haircut he now had to pretend not to hate. We're on the same team. I watched my hands push the vase to the center again. It surprised me as much as it surprised him. The lilies looked like hands in prayer. He didn't touch the vase. He went to the bedroom and came out jiggling his keys. I'm going to the studio, he said, his voice elastic, too casual. I'll be back later. Try to get out of your head. When the door closed, my apartment had the airless quiet of a place that knows it has been inspected. I stood in the middle of the living room and tried to make myself love what was left. The couch slightly sagging, the bowl with 3 oranges and 1 limes, the cactus on the windowsill with its 2 ridiculous arms. I found I could cry, and also feel bored by my own crying at the same time. An invention. I fell asleep on the couch with the lamps on and my phone under my cheekbone like a fossil. I woke up at 1:13 a.m. to my phone buzzing. Aiden. Unlock the door. Another buzz, then. Forgot my keys. A small relief. Something practical. I went to the door and undid the chain. When I pulled it open, he didn't meet my eyes. He brushed past me, trailing cold October air. He walked halfway down the hall and stopped, quivering in place like a dog that had smelled something in another room. He turned. His eyes were unnervingly bright. You didn't answer my texts earlier, he said. What were you doing? I was asleep, I said. It's 1 a.m. You quoted a line of my song wrong, he said, and for a moment I thought I'd misheard. On your story. You posted and botched the lyric. I blinked. A gummy panic rose in my throat. It was just a story, I said. I typed fast. Do you know what it feels like when the woman who is supposed to be my home sends a wrong message about me to the world? He wasn't shouting. He was worse. He was precise. He was a scalpel. It makes me look incompetent. It makes me look like I don't matter to you. I corrected it. I said, though I wasn't sure if I had. I could hardly remember the sequence of anything anymore. That isn't the point, he said. The point is you are careless with me. I felt something inside me set down the lilies and fold its hands. I'm going to bed, I said, and the way his face changed told me that was the wrong thing to say, because I wasn't supposed to end conversations without his permission. It was like saying a spell. Bed. I walked to the bedroom anyway. He followed. We're not done, he said. You don't get to abandon me. I turned and faced him. I said very calmly, because I had read somewhere that calm is a secret doorway, even when you think the building is locked. I'm not abandoning you. I'm going to sleep. We can talk tomorrow. He stepped closer. You always do this when things get hard, he said. You retreat. It's cruel. The word knocked into me. Cruel. This was a man who had once placed my frozen hands under his shirt in the grocery aisle and said, warmer, like a child. This was a man who had called me his beloved oasis. Mockable, yes. But at the time it had made me click my tongue at him and kiss his ear. Cruel did not feel like a word that belonged to me, but he had said it. The word existed now in the room. It stood on the edge of the rug and tapped its foot.